Imagine this. You're on a live talk show, cameras rolling, millions watching. The host starts cracking jokes, not the funny kind, but the cruel kind. He mocks your voice, your calm nature, even your silence. You're Keanu Reeves. And instead of fighting back, you stay composed. Peaceful. Then, just when the audience starts to squirm in discomfort, a legend sitting next to you, Steven Seagal, leans forward and says just one sentence. A sentence so powerful, so unexpected, it shuts the entire room down and changes the conversation across the internet. What did he say? And why did it strike such a nerve with millions of people? It all started with what was supposed to be a light-hearted talk show. Just laughs, celebrity banter, and a few jokes to keep the live audience entertained and viewers at home engaged. The set was bright, the energy buzzing, and the guest lineup had people talking all week. Two action movie legends were about to share the same stage, Keanu Reeves and Steven Seagal. Both had carved their names deep into Hollywood's history books. Keanu, with his roles in The Matrix, John Wick, and Speed, was known for his quiet nature, generosity, and thoughtful demeanor. Steven Seagal, on the other hand, was famous for his intense presence, martial arts background, and no-nonsense personality. It was a pairing that had fans curious and excited. The host of the show was someone known for walking the fine line between humor and offense. His comedic style was sharp, sometimes biting, and while it made for viral moments, it also left a trail of uncomfortable guests in its wake. Still, with a live audience cheering and cameras rolling, the show pressed on. From the moment Keanu stepped onto the stage, something felt off. The applause was loud, but there was a strange tension in the air. As he took his seat beside Steven, the host's grin widened. The first few questions seemed innocent enough, about their latest projects, their approach to action scenes, their training routines. But it didn't take long for the host's tone to shift. He leaned forward with a mischievous glint in his eye and said, "Keanu, man, I gotta ask, do you ever wake up in the morning and think, maybe today I'll show a little emotion?" The audience gave a scattered chuckle, unsure if it was okay to laugh. Keanu smiled politely and replied with grace, "I try to stay present." A soft-spoken response that reflected his well-known mindfulness and humility. But the host wasn't satisfied. He kept poking, like a comedian who didn't know when the joke had gone too far. "You know, when you talk in interviews, you sound like a sleepy GPS," he quipped. Recalculating, "Turn left, whoa." This time, the laughter was louder. Some of it was genuine, some of it nervous. Keanu chuckled softly, unfazed, as if he'd heard it all before. He didn't defend himself. He didn't shoot back. He just sat there, calm, respectful, and composed. Then came the next act. The host pulled up a screen and said, "We've got a little something for our viewers at home." What followed was a mashup of Keanu's interviews and movie scenes, heavily edited to exaggerate his pauses, his low voice, and his thoughtful expressions. Dramatic music played in the background, and text popped up saying things like, "Is he acting or napping?" and "Keanu XE is not responding." The studio laughed, but the vibe had clearly shifted from comedy to mockery. Steven Seagal, sitting quietly with his arms crossed, hadn't said a word. He had been observing the entire time, his face unreadable. Known for his stoic nature, Seagal wasn't one to interrupt or play along just for entertainment. But now, as the edited video ended and the host turned back to Keanu with a smug grin, saying, "Come on, Keanu, give us a little something, maybe yell or throw a punch, you're in John Wick after all," the room held its breath. That's when Seagal finally moved. He leaned forward, placing both hands on the table in front of him. His voice was calm but heavy, the kind of tone that makes you listen before you even register the words. He stared at the host, unblinking, and said, "Don't mistake kindness for weakness." The words hit the room like a wave. You could feel the energy shift. The audience went quiet. The host's grin twitched ever so slightly, unsure whether to laugh it off or apologize. Seagal wasn't smiling. He wasn't joking. He meant every word. "You mock a man who's been through more than most," Seagal continued. "Lost people he loved. Given quietly to charity. Helped strangers without needing a camera in his face. And you call that boring?" He looked at Keanu and gave a slow, respectful nod. "That's real strength." Keanu looked back at Seagal, visibly touched, and gave a soft nod in return. "Thank you," he said. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was powerful. A silence filled with realization. The audience, once caught up in the rhythm of jokes and jabs, now clapped, not because they were prompted, but because they felt it. They saw something real. A man who remained humble and kind even when he was the punchline. And another man who, despite his own controversies, recognized the value of dignity and chose to defend it. After the show aired, that moment went viral. Social media lit up. Clips of Seagal's statement were shared across platforms with captions like, "This is how you shut down disrespect," and "Keanu's calm is not weakness, it's wisdom." Viewers from around the world praised Keanu for his grace under pressure, and surprisingly, many praised Seagal for using his platform to speak a simple, profound truth. And the host? He never addressed the incident publicly. Maybe he realized he crossed a line. Maybe he didn't care. But for the millions who watched, the message was clear. In a world that often rewards loud voices and cruel humor, true strength is sometimes quiet, patient, and kind. Keanu didn't need to fight back. He didn't need to raise his voice. His silence spoke louder than any joke. And thanks to one sentence from Steven Seagal, the world was reminded that kindness is never a weakness, it's a choice made by the strongest among us. "You're the nicest guy in Hollywood," the host said with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "But seriously, Keanu, do you ever feel anything? Or are you just always asleep inside?" His voice echoed through the studio, and the room went strangely still for a split second. Then came a wave of laughter, uneven, forced. Some in the audience chuckled hesitantly, unsure if the joke was too much. Others looked around, gauging reactions before committing to a smile. It wasn't the kind of laughter that fills a room with warmth. It was the kind that leaves a bad taste in the air. Keanu, sitting comfortably in his chair, didn't react much. Just a soft smile and a calm, collected look in his eyes. He leaned forward slightly, his hands resting on his knees, and replied in his usual composed tone, "I just try to be present." Simple, sincere, and straight from the heart. But it wasn't the kind of reply the host wanted. He was clearly fishing for something, a defensive answer, a fiery comeback, anything he could latch onto and spin into more entertainment. But Keanu gave him none of it. The host tried again, pushing the envelope even further. "Come on, man. Where's the fire? Are you even acting or just reading lines in slow motion?" The studio lights caught the gleam in the host's eyes. He was enjoying himself far too much, mistaking mockery for humor. He leaned back, arms wide, as if expecting applause for his cleverness. This time, though, the laughter was thinner, more cautious. The audience was starting to sense that something wasn't right. The jokes had shifted from light teasing to something darker. It wasn't funny anymore, it was personal. Still, Keanu sat quietly. Not angry. Not humiliated. Just centered. His demeanor never changed. He didn't roll his eyes, didn't show offense, didn't fire back. That's who he was. A man who had seen both fame and tragedy, and who carried himself with humility and grace through it all. But the host wasn't done. Not even close. With a smug grin, he gestured toward the screen behind them. "All right, let's take a look at some of Keanu's finest moments." The screen flickered to life, and what followed was a montage labeled Keanu's Most Boring Moments. It was a crudely edited compilation of Keanu being, well, himself. Clips of him pausing before answering questions, offering thoughtful comments, kneeling to sign autographs, picking up a fan's dropped bag, sitting in silence during interviews. All played with sarcastic narration and mocking sound effects. Dramatic zoom-ins, sad trombones, and fake yawns echoed over his quiet moments of humanity. It was clear the host had spent time preparing this segment. It wasn't spontaneous. It was a deliberate attempt to turn Keanu Reeves into a punchline. A target. The audience stared up at the screen, their expressions shifting. Some people laughed, though it was more out of habit than humor. Others looked genuinely uncomfortable, watching the show spiral into something mean-spirited. The producers likely thought it would be great television, a viral moment. But what was actually happening felt more like a slow-motion car crash. Keanu didn't move. He didn't shift in his seat or frown. His face remained calm. Not detached, but present. Just as he had said. You could see he was listening, absorbing the moment without letting it control him. And somehow, that made the host's attempts to get under his skin look even worse. Because no matter how much he pushed, Keanu wouldn't bend. But someone else was bending. Or rather, stirring. Seated next to Keanu, Steven Seagal had been silent the entire time. Arms crossed, sunglasses on, jaw tight. He wasn't known for being warm or overly expressive, but there was something in the way he shifted slightly in his seat that said more than words. Unlike the host, Seagal didn't need to raise his voice or smirk to command attention. His presence was heavy, rooted. He watched the screen, then glanced at Keanu, then back at the host. The corners of his mouth didn't move. But you could tell, he wasn't amused. The host, perhaps sensing the discomfort, tried to loop Seagal into the joke. "Steven, you're a man of few words too. Do you ever understand what Keanu's saying, or do you both just kind of meditate in silence?" It was a cheap shot, thinly veiled as humor. But it landed with a thud. That's when Seagal moved. He uncrossed his arms slowly and leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. His sunglasses stayed on, but his voice didn't need his eyes to back it up. It was low, steady, and sharp as a blade. "Don't mistake kindness for weakness," he said. The audience went dead silent. The host blinked, clearly not expecting that. It wasn't loud. It wasn't threatening. But it cut through the noise of the entire evening. There was no follow-up punchline, no exaggerated facial expression, just the raw truth of those words hanging in the air like smoke. And in that moment, everything shifted. The audience, once caught in the rhythm of forced laughter and awkward jokes, started to realize the weight of what they had been witnessing. This wasn't just comedy anymore. It was bullying disguised as banter. Keanu didn't need to defend himself. He had already won the moment by refusing to stoop to the host's level. But Seagal's words turned the tide. It wasn't just a defense, it was a lesson. For the host, there was no clever comeback. No punchline strong enough to undo the silence that followed. And for everyone watching, both in the studio and later online, that one sentence, delivered with quiet force, would echo far louder than any joke that came before it. Steven Seagal had been silent throughout most of this. Sitting next to Keanu, arms folded, posture straight, eyes fixed on the host with an unreadable expression. There was no smirk, no glance toward the audience, no attempt to play along with the talk show's usual game of laughs and jabs. He had the stillness of a statue, but the kind that looked like it might come to life at any second, not to perform, but to correct a mistake. Now, love him or hate him, Seagal has always carried a unique kind of presence. It wasn't just his years as an action star or his martial arts background. It was the way he walked into a room and made people lower their voices without trying. There was a weight to him, a controlled intensity. The kind of presence that didn't shout to be heard, it simply existed and demanded attention. And on that stage, in that moment, he was still as stone but not unnoticed. If anything, his silence was growing louder with each of the host's mockeries. The audience could feel the shift. It wasn't just about humor anymore. It was about something deeper, something uncomfortable. Keanu, ever graceful, had been absorbing the blows like a seasoned warrior. No resistance, no ego. Just a calm, centered presence that neither fought back nor crumbled. But for those who knew how to read the energy in a room, something was clearly building. There was tension between the lines of laughter. The host, perhaps drunk on the reaction he'd gotten so far, decided to go in one more time. And this time, he pointed the spotlight directly at Seagal. "Steven," he said with a grin, hoping to break the intensity, "do you even understand what Keanu says half the time? Or do you both just stare at each other until the world ends?" The joke landed with a faint ripple of laughter, but it didn't have the bite the host expected. It wasn't clever, it was desperate. Trying to pull Seagal into the joke, into the performance, into the illusion that all of this was harmless. But this time, Seagal moved. He leaned forward slowly, methodically. The kind of movement that demands your eyes even before your brain realizes why. His hands, once tucked under his arms, now rested heavily on the desk. His back straightened even more. The light above caught the shine in his eyes, and his face, stone cold, turned fully toward the host. There was no aggression, no visible anger. But there was a finality in his gaze, like a door closing slowly but firmly. And then he spoke. With a voice that was deep and low, Like thunder from a distant storm just starting to roll in, Steven Seagal said the words that brought the room to a complete standstill. Don't mistake kindness for weakness. It was not just a statement, it was a correction. A verdict. And in that moment, the talk show set, so accustomed to noise and reaction, fell into a perfect, echoing silence. The audience held their breath. The cameras captured the host frozen mid-smile, as if unsure whether to laugh it off or respond. Keanu, still seated calmly beside him, gave a small nod of acknowledgement, grateful, perhaps, or simply understanding the power of what had just occurred. There was something unmistakable in Seagal's tone. It didn't ask for agreement. It didn't seek applause. It wasn't performative. It was simply truth, and it landed with more force than anything that had come before. All the host's jokes, all the sarcasm, the video montage meant to ridicule, none of it stood a chance against those 6 words. Because in that brief sentence, Seagal wasn't just defending Keanu. He was defending a principle, a way of being. The idea that quiet people are often misjudged, and that humility is often misunderstood. The host tried to recover, chuckling awkwardly. "It's just a joke, man," he said, raising his hands as if to wave it off. "We're just having fun." But no one laughed with him this time. Steven leaned back again, slowly, saying nothing more. His silence resumed, but now it was different. It wasn't the silence of inaction. It was the silence of someone who had said exactly what needed to be said and didn't feel the need to repeat himself. And the studio audience, slowly processing what had just happened, broke into a hesitant applause. Then, stronger. It wasn't the usual forced clapping that follows a segment. It was real. It was respectful. Keanu turned slightly toward Seagal, gave him a gentle smile, and said, "Thank you." No big reaction. No drama. Just that familiar calm, now reinforced by someone who had decided to stand beside him when others mocked. What followed was a noticeable change in tone. The host moved on quickly, the energy deflated. His attempts to regain control of the show never quite landed the same way. Because once the truth has been spoken so clearly, it changes everything. The room knew it. The viewers at home would know it. And the internet would replay that clip thousands of times, remembering the moment when the joke stopped being funny and someone decided to stand up for what really matters. Keanu didn't need to defend himself. He had nothing to prove. But the world was reminded, thanks to one sentence, that true strength isn't found in dominance or mockery. It's found in grace, in humility, in standing firm, even when the spotlight turns hostile. And in the silence that follows a truth so powerful, no one dares to interrupt it. That one sentence hit like a slap across the face, not just to the host, but to everyone watching. Don't mistake kindness for weakness. It echoed through the studio like a warning, not loud, but powerful. Steven Seagal hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't pointed fingers or stood up. He just sat there, grounded like a mountain, and delivered a truth so direct and unmistakable that the entire room shifted. You could see it in the host's face, the awkward twitch in his smile, the slight recoil, the sudden realization that he had crossed a line. The audience, previously chuckling or clapping on cue, was silent now. Not out of fear, but respect. The energy had changed. This wasn't showbiz anymore. It was something real. Seagal hadn't come to play a role. He hadn't come to sit through shallow jokes and viral skits. And he certainly hadn't come to watch someone like Keanu Reeves, one of the most soft-spoken and respected figures in Hollywood, get ridiculed under the mask of humor. Because this wasn't just a defense of Keanu. It was a call-out of an entire mindset. A cultural habit of mocking what we don't understand. Of treating kindness as weakness. Of assuming that someone who doesn't shout or push back must not have power. The host, caught off guard but trying to recover, gave a nervous laugh. "Oh, come on, just a joke," he said, his voice slightly higher than before. It was the kind of line people throw out when they know they've gone too far, but aren't ready to admit it. A plea disguised as humor. He gestured with his hands like he was trying to physically wave the tension away. But it didn't work. Because Steven Seagal wasn't done. He leaned slightly forward again, his voice steady, calm, but now sharpened with clarity. "You mock someone who's helped people quietly his whole life. He's been through tragedy and still chooses peace. That's strength. You just don't recognize it. Those words landed harder than the first. The studio felt smaller, quieter. It was the kind of truth that doesn't need backup or applause. It simply is. No dressing. No performance. Just facts, delivered by a man who had seen enough of the world to know the difference between a real warrior and someone pretending to be clever on camera. And Keanu? He didn't look surprised. He wasn't rattled. He had been steady from the beginning. This was the same man who had given away a big portion of his Matrix earnings to crew members, who'd been spotted quietly helping strangers without fanfare, who had lost people he loved and still came back to life with gentleness. That's what Steven saw. That's what the audience was finally starting to see again, past the memes and jokes and slow-motion parodies. Seagal turned to Keanu and gave a slow, respectful nod. "You're a good man," he said. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't grandstanding. It was simply an acknowledgement. One man recognizing another for who he truly was. Keanu, ever the gracious soul, gave a small smile and replied, "Thank you." And in that brief exchange, something remarkable happened. The audience broke into applause, not the kind prompted by a sign flashing from the ceiling, and not the soft, uncertain claps of people unsure what to do. No, this was genuine. The kind of applause that comes from witnessing something honest. Something that pierces through the noise and reaches people at their core. The kind of moment that isn't just about two celebrities on a stage, but about something bigger, about values we forget to celebrate. The host, now visibly smaller in his chair, didn't say much more. He shifted topics quickly, trying to regain his rhythm, but the show had changed. No one was interested in the next funny segment or the next viral joke. People had just seen real character. And you can't unsee that. By the next day, clips from the show were everywhere. Social media lit up, not with jokes or memes, but with praise for what had happened. Comments poured in. Steven said what we were all thinking. Keanu's grace is unmatched. Finally, someone called out the fake, funny stuff for what it is. The moment resonated not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. And in a world so hungry for authenticity, that truth spread like wildfire. Keanu didn't speak on it afterward. He didn't post a reaction or do follow-up interviews about the incident. He just continued on as he always does, humble, thoughtful, kind. And that was the most powerful part of it all. He didn't need to defend himself. He didn't need a viral moment. He just lived his values. And the world saw. As for Steven Seagal, whatever people thought of him before, they couldn't ignore what he did that day. He didn't come for the spotlight, but when the moment called for it, he spoke, and in doing so, reminded millions of a timeless truth: real strength doesn't shout. It stands up quietly, speaks plainly, and does the right thing even when no one expects it. In a world full of noise, that moment of silence, filled with dignity, respect, and truth, was louder than anything else. The clip of that moment went viral like wildfire. Within hours of the talk show airing, it was all over social media, shared across platforms with captions like, "This is how you shut down disrespect," and "Watch Seagal humble a talk show host in seconds." The moment where Steven Seagal calmly said, "Don't mistake kindness for weakness," was clipped, remixed, subtitled, and reposted millions of times. It wasn't just a viral moment for entertainment. It became a symbol of something much deeper. People weren't just watching it. They were feeling it. Headlines soon followed, bold and dramatic, but none overstated what had happened. They were accurate, if not understated. Steven Seagal shuts down host over Keanu disrespect. Keanu keeps calm while Seagal drops truth bomb. The day a joke went too far, and someone finally said enough. These weren't just clickbait. They captured what viewers all over the world had experienced in that 5-minute stretch of television. The awkwardness of watching someone be mocked unfairly, the power of restraint, and the even greater power of someone else stepping in, not with aggression, but with truth. Comments flooded the internet. People from all walks of life, fans, critics, actors, influencers, shared their thoughts. Some praised Keanu's humility, calling him a living example of grace under pressure. Others applauded Seagal for doing what so many wish they could: call out cruelty, not with rage, but with presence. One popular comment read, "In a world where everyone's trying to go viral by being loud, Keanu is changing lives by being quiet." And Seagal just reminded us that quiet people deserve to be protected too. But even more meaningful than the praise was the reflection. That moment sparked a deeper conversation. People started asking real questions. Why do we make fun of kindness? Why do we confuse being reserved with being weak? Why is the person who talks the most or jokes the loudest often considered the strongest in the room? And why is someone like Keanu, who has spent his career choosing humility over hype, so often the punchline instead of the role model? Keanu Reeves is not just another Hollywood actor. His life is filled with a series of quiet, powerful choices that reveal who he truly is. He's donated millions of dollars to children's hospitals, often anonymously. He's given away large portions of his film salaries to crew members and special effects teams, people who rarely get the credit they deserve. He rides the subway. He helps fans. He waits in line like everyone else. He's been through devastating personal loss, including the death of a child and the tragic passing of a partner, yet he continues to show up in the world with softness, with patience, with kindness. He doesn't need to post daily affirmations or make speeches about compassion. He lives it. And until that viral moment, much of it went unnoticed or was written off as just how Keanu is. But then came Steven Seagal, a man often associated with intensity, action, and toughness. And yet, in that brief exchange, he flipped the script. He didn't speak for long, but what he said was exactly what the world needed to hear. It wasn't just about defending a friend or co-star. It was about standing up for a principle. In Seagal's words, you could hear a lifetime of observation. You mock someone who's helped people quietly his whole life. He's been through tragedy and still chooses peace. That's strength. You just don't recognize it. Those words cut through decades of toxic assumptions. They reminded people that strength isn't about being loud or dominant. Sometimes, it's about being unshakably kind in a world that tries to knock that kindness out of you. The most striking part? Seagal didn't say it with fanfare. He wasn't trying to trend or go viral. He didn't follow up with a tweet or a press statement. He just said what needed to be said, and let the truth do the rest. In that way, he mirrored the very person he was defending. Just like Keanu, Seagal let his actions speak louder than any promo reel or interview ever could. That moment didn't just entertain people, it moved them. It gave viewers a chance to reflect on the kind of people they admire and why. It challenged the idea that compassion is boring, that patience is weakness, that being calm means being lesser. It reminded people that the world doesn't just need heroes who fight with fists or words, but also those who lead by example, who lift others up, and who stay true to their values even under public pressure. In the days that followed, countless posts began surfacing, retelling other quiet stories of Keanu's kindness. Fans he helped, strangers he supported, random acts of generosity he never publicized. And alongside them came a new wave of respect for Seagal. Not because he was perfect, but because in that one moment, he chose to do the right thing instead of staying silent. He didn't take over the spotlight. He used it to redirect attention to someone who deserved better. The clip might fade from trending lists in time, but the impact it left will stick with many who saw it. Because in a world obsessed with noise, one sentence spoken in stillness reminded us all of something timeless. Real strength doesn't need to prove itself. And sometimes, it takes a warrior to defend a monk. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that kindness is a strength, not a weakness, then take a moment to give this video a like. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you love powerful stories like this, about real character, respect, and standing up for what's right, make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a new one. Thanks for watching, and remember, stay kind, stay strong. Everyone's trying to go viral by being loud. Keanu is changing lives by being quiet. And Seagal just reminded us that quiet people deserve to be protected too. But even more meaningful than the praise was the reflection. That moment sparked a deeper conversation. People started asking real questions. Why do we make fun of kindness? Why do we confuse being reserved with being weak? Why is the person who talks the most or jokes the loudest often considered the strongest in the room? And why is someone like Keanu, who has spent his career choosing humility over hype, so often the punchline instead of the role model? Keanu Reeves is not just another Hollywood actor. His life is filled with a series of quiet, powerful choices that reveal who he truly is. He's donated millions of dollars to children's hospitals, often anonymously. He's given away large portions of his film salaries to crew members and special effects teams, people who rarely get the credit they deserve. He rides the subway. He helps fans. He waits in line like everyone else. He's been through devastating personal loss, including the death of a child and the tragic passing of a partner, yet he continues to show up in the world with softness, with patience, with kindness. He doesn't need to post daily affirmations or make speeches about compassion. He lives it. And until that viral moment, much of it went unnoticed or was written off as just how Keanu is. But then came Steven Seagal, a man often associated with intensity, action, and toughness. And yet, in that brief exchange, he flipped the script. He didn't speak for long, but what he said was exactly what the world needed to hear. It wasn't just about defending a friend or co-star. It was about standing up for a principle. In Seagal's words, you could hear a lifetime of observation. You mock someone who's helped people quietly his whole life. He's been through tragedy and still chooses peace. That's strength. You just don't recognize it. Those words cut through decades of toxic assumptions. They reminded people that strength isn't about being loud or dominant. Sometimes, it's about being unshakably kind in a world that tries to knock that kindness out of you. The most striking part? Seagal didn't say it with fanfare. He wasn't trying to trend or go viral. He didn't follow up with a tweet or a press statement. He just said what needed to be said, and let the truth do the rest. In that way, he mirrored the very person he was defending. Just like Keanu, Seagal let his actions speak louder than any promo reel or interview ever could. That moment didn't just entertain people, it moved them. It gave viewers a chance to reflect on the kind of people they admire and why. It challenged the idea that compassion is boring, that patience is weakness, that being calm means being lesser. It reminded people that the world doesn't just need heroes who fight with fists or words, but also those who lead by example, who lift others up, and who stay true to their values even under public pressure. In the days that followed, countless posts began surfacing, retelling other quiet stories of Keanu's kindness. Fans he helped, strangers he supported, random acts of generosity he never publicized. And alongside them came a new wave of respect for Seagal. Not because he was perfect, but because in that one moment, he chose to do the right thing instead of staying silent. He didn't take over the spotlight. He used it to redirect attention to someone who deserved better. The clip might fade from trending lists in time, but the impact it left will stick with many who saw it. Because in a world obsessed with noise, one sentence spoken in stillness reminded us all of something timeless. Real strength doesn't need to prove itself. And sometimes, it takes a warrior to defend a monk. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that kindness is a strength, not a weakness, then take a moment to give this video a like. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you love powerful stories like this, about real character, respect, and standing up for what's right, make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a new one. Thanks for watching, and remember, stay kind, stay strong.